Chapter 8. Bella, why don't you grab a swimsuit? There's something I saw yesterday that I've been dying to show you. I knew my enthusiasm sounded forced. Bella regarded me with suspicion, but retreated into the bedroom without a word. Several minutes passed. I stepped out onto the shady porch and scanned the horizon, hoping to see the telltale splashes and gray twisting bodies that would indicate the dolphins were close. Perhaps on the other side of the island. The reef was more developed there, and presumably offered better hunting for aquatic mammals. I set off around the leeward side of the island at a fast pace. From a low bluff I was able to see for miles, until the curvature of the earth swallowed the ocean. Sure enough, sunlight glinted off a stunning aerobatic display. Silver bodies leapt and dove in a choreographed performance that took my breath away. Bella would absolutely love this. I returned to the bungalow in a flash. I heard the whisper of bare feet as Bella padded across the house to join me. The strong smell of coconut-scented sunblock almost completely obscured Bella's natural floral scent. I wrinkled my nose in distaste. On second thought, this should make things a bit easier for me. Bella stepped out onto the porch. Never mind, I take that back. It was definitely a struggle to maintain my placid expression. Alice had packed a designer bikini that looked like it was made just for Bella. Rich, chocolate-brown fabric was gathered in a layered twist to form a stylish top. The bottoms were matching fabric and sat low on her hips. I had always admired Bella's figure, but this was stunning and sexy and unbelievably adorable. I had become accustomed to Bella's normal, conservative dressing. Alice always cringed at Bella's wardrobe, but I never really cared. Seeing her dressed like this made me alternately dazed and proud to the point of conceit. The most desirable woman in the world had chosen me. The dark bruises that mottled her skin kept me sober, but I was able to offer her a genuine smile as I took her hand and led her down to the beach.
"So what is this big surprise?" Bella cast a sidelong glance at me. She looked uncomfortable in the skimpy beach wear, but somehow that just made her more attractive. "I know you don't like surprises. Just trust me. This is going to be an exception to the rule." It took more than 10 minutes to walk to the bluff where I had sighted the dolphins, a distance that had taken me only seconds when I ran. Bella picked her way carefully along the sandy trail. Occasionally roots and vines somehow grabbed her ankles and tripped up her feet. I found myself wondering how our relationship would change when Bella was a vampire. How much of her attraction to me was based on my superior strength and agility. If I wasn't superhuman to her, would she still look at me with those wide-eyed glances that I adored?
She would be stronger than me for the first several months, possibly a whole year. I was the fastest of my family, but she would definitely rival my speed as a newborn. I tried to shrug off this latest insecurity, but the seed of doubt had already put down its first roots. Don't be stupid. Bella wants you. She is sacrificing her entire life, her future with her family, everything she's ever known, just to spend eternity with you. But what if I wasn't enough? Eternity is a long time. Bella was less than 19 years old, to my 108 years. I had seen and done things she could never dream of. When I met Bella, I knew she was the one. A century of searching had told me that. But what if it wasn't the same for her? The human mind and body are simple and weak compared to a vampire's. I knew she would be the same Bella, just as I was the same Edward. However, something fundamental would change between us, and I wasn't sure if that change would bring us closer or pull us apart. Bella gasped and stumbled. Reflexively, I held her by the waist before she could hit the ground.
"Ow! Oh! I stubbed my toe!"
She leaned against me, rubbing her offended foot vigorously.
"Edward, you have no idea how jealous I am sometimes. You can walk through anything barefoot without ever wincing. Ugh! Sometimes I hate being just a clumsy human."
I laughed despite myself. "Would you like me to carry you? It's just a bit further." My voice sounded a little off, despite my humor. Bella looked into my eyes, trying to read them, although I'm not sure what she expected to see. I took her hesitation as consent and swept her into my arms.
"Edward!"
she shrieked in surprise. "Humor me." I was already running, and Bella was holding tightly to my neck as the tropical landscape whipped past us. Before she had taken 3 breaths, I had reached the top of the bluff and set her down, facing the ocean. The sun was beginning its descent, and the water shimmered in the afternoon light. Bella was standing still. Her face glowed in the warm sunlight, and her hair was streaked with red and auburn highlights. A light breeze was blowing toward us. Bella's eyes feasted on the panoramic view, but mine were fixed on her childlike expression of enchantment.
"Oh, did you see that?"
She pointed excitedly. I heard the accompanying splash and the high-pitched chirping.
"Oh, Edward, they're dolphins! They're so beautiful!"
I held Bella's hand as we clambered down the sandy bank. When we reached the bottom, Bella squished her toes into the sand with delight. I mimicked her, analyzing the feeling of the white grains slipping like crushed diamonds between my toes. It was a strangely stimulating sensation. Bella looked down at my feet, then grinned. I couldn't help myself. I laughed out loud.
"Come on, I want to get closer."
Her excitement was contagious, and we were soon diving into the shallow water. We were only 10 yards out when the dolphins started retreating into deeper water.
"Oh no, where are they going? Do you think we scared them?"
I was shocked to pick up on a mental feeling of unease and defensiveness. I looked at Bella, and she returned my stare with a questioning look. We were treading water with no human beings for dozens of miles in any direction. There it was again, a vague sensation, like focused emotions without words. The feeling faded and became cautiously curious. At that moment, I heard the trilling sound of the dolphins communicating with one another. They had ceased their retreat, and were leaping and cavorting back and forth, less than 100 yards offshore. Carlyle is going to be beside himself when I tell him about this. I responded to Bella's earlier question. "No, you didn't scare them. I did." She raised her eyebrow, waiting for me to continue. "They sensed my presence, and must instinctively see me as a predatory threat, but they're curious. If I get out of the water, they may come closer in."
"Really? Do you think they would come this far?"
"We can always see." Something akin to adrenaline was stimulating my sense of excitement and adventure. Bella's eyes were bright, and her breathing was fast, but strong, even with the exertion of treading water for so long. "Will you be okay if I wait on the beach?" I was a little concerned to be far from her side, but I knew I could swim the distance in seconds. I had heard of dolphins and their friendly attitudes toward humans, but the humming of emotions and wordless thoughts in the back of my mind placed them much closer to humans than I had guessed. When Bella nodded her assent, I stroked swiftly back to the sandy strip and stood just out of the water, watching Bella closely. It took several minutes, but then I felt a shift in the pod's intentions. The sleek bodies cruised just beneath the waves, traveling swiftly toward Bella. I was nervous now. The feeling I picked up on was simply curiosity, but these were animals, not people, strong animals, who were known, on occasion, to fight and beat sharks in open attacks. I shivered at the thought, and stood tensed and ready to spring into the water at the first sign of danger. I identified 4 different heartbeats now. The closest dolphin paused, floating vertically in the water, with its head standing clear of the waves. Beady eyes peered at us, intelligent, considering. The others hung back, circling and occasionally coming up for air. Bella reached out one hand, still paddling and treading water steadily. Not for the first time, I admired her bravery and curiosity. I knew that the leader was assessing me. Suspicion and curiosity wavered back and forth, before curiosity won. The leader closed the last 5 yards slowly, and paused before Bella's outstretched hand. She didn't even flinch. The bottle-shaped nose bumped gently against her hand. Her bell-like laugh rippled across the water as she caressed the silver-skinned creature. The other 3 joined the first, and one leapt into the air, spinning once, before slicing effortlessly back into the water. I was mesmerized by the sight of Bella, so at ease in this environment. How was it that she could have such an affinity for animals and mythical creatures, but have such a difficult time relating to her own species? Bella swam for almost an hour, with the dolphins cavorting jubilantly around her. They had never had friends not of their own kind. The humans in boats did not usually come to this area. They were as amused by Bella as she was of them. I could tell when Bella began to tire, although I was nowhere close to being tired of watching her. She was having so much fun.
Bella, did you want to come in now? We can always come back tomorrow. And the next day? She called back. Her voice was tinged with exhaustion, but still light and carefree. Of course, if you wish,
I chuckled as I swam back out to her. She was grateful for my assistance, probably only now registering the fatigue in her muscles. The dolphins fled to deeper water as soon as I was knee-deep in the ocean. However, the threatened feeling was more like wary speculation this time. Bella draped her arms around my neck and allowed me to tow her safely into the shallows. Back on her feet, she clasped my hands in hers, and we found a place in the sand to sit and absorb the orange rays of the setting sun. Bella leaned her head back on my shoulder, but kept my hand in hers. "What are you thinking?" I asked.
"Just that I think this must be a magical place."
She smiled warmly up at me. The setting sun cast a rosy glow across her features. "I have to agree with you, love." Bella tilted her face up to mine, her lips slightly apart. I lowered my mouth to hers, enchanted by the tender gesture of trust and affection. Bella twisted slightly to face me, and her free hand cupped the base of my skull, pulling my mouth more firmly against hers. Her sweet taste, and the velvet caress of her tongue on my lips, sent my thoughts flying away, far away. There was only her and me. No house, no beach, no ocean. Just us, floating through the ether, wrapped in a cocoon of warmest silk. Bella inhaled sharply through her nose. I moved my kisses to her jaw, then throat, allowing her to draw in several lungfuls of air. Her heartbeat pounded out a furious rhythm. I grabbed her shoulders, pulling her deeper into my embrace. She flinched in my hands. I stiffened and pushed her away, suddenly aware that my stone-hard fingers were digging into her tender, day-old bruises. I flinched as if it were my own flesh that had been tortured. "Edward, don't." "Don't what?"
"Don't pull away from me like that." Her voice was thick with emotion, disappointment, and something more. "I just don't want you to miss your first tropical sunset." I smiled sweetly at her, and nodded towards the orange orb that was hanging pendulously over the western horizon. The ocean was on fire. Streaks of red and amber reflected the cloudless sky. Bella glared at me, at first. She didn't want to let this go, but the brilliance of the setting sun overpowered her need to corner me with her agenda. Bella was smiling again, leaning against my body in a languid way that I knew indicated sleep was not far off. We sat silently as the sun melted into the ocean. The island was coming alive with evening sounds. Mosquitoes droned, and birds called out to one another. We would explore the island tomorrow. Right now, I needed to get Bella back to the house, fed, and into bed. Bella allowed me to carry her home without argument. Dinner was a quick and simple affair. Scrambled eggs, a slice of ham, and toast with fresh butter. I felt a little guilty about the anticlimactic end to our day, but Bella seemed famished, and obviously wouldn't wait for me to prepare something more complicated. Tomorrow I would surprise her with a more sophisticated menu. My khakis were stiff from the 2 swims in the ocean, and drying while we sat in the sun on the sandy beach. Bella had a slight sunburn on her nose and shoulders. Her shoulders were rolled forward, as she violently tried to beat back the exhaustion that was weighing her down. "Why don't we get you to bed?" I murmured, when she had cleared her plate of every last crumb. She nodded weakly. Bella leaned against me as I escorted her into the large bathroom. Her feet stumbled a bit, but she seemed to be revitalized at the prospect of a shower. I did not join her in that shower. I honestly didn't know how I would have fared, with last night's memories still so vivid and powerful. Instead, I sat on the floor, a cool construction of dark slate laid in a diamond pattern, and we talked in quiet tones about some of the other attractions of the island. After today's adventure, Bella was eager to explore more, and I thrilled at her joyful anticipation. Bella turned off the shower, and I held out a large, fluffy beige towel for her to wrap herself in. She blushed, dipping her head shyly as I took her place and started the water.
I self-consciously shed my filthy slacks, and swiftly rinsed away the salt and sand. Bella was watching me as I grabbed the other towel and wrapped it around my waist. I didn't like the way she was assessing me. Well, actually, I did like it. Way too much. I cleared my throat uncomfortably, and was rewarded by her scarlet blush.
So I'll see you in a minute?
I nodded in reply, as I squeezed past her and heard the bathroom door shut softly behind me. I ran my hands through my hair, dragging my fingers against my scalp. This was going to be difficult. I went to our bedroom to grab some clothes, and was met by a downy layer of feathers. I exhaled forcefully, and gathered the contents of my suitcase. There was another bedroom. "Bella," I knocked softly on the bathroom door.
Yes?
She replied, surprised. Her voice sounded odd, and I registered that I must have interrupted her brushing her teeth. "I thought we should sleep in the other room until the cleaning crew can take care of this. I'll bring your suitcase over after you're done, okay?"
Okay,
she agreed. I stood at the tall window, lost in thought. I heard Bella exit the bathroom and rummage around looking for clothes. I doubted Alice would approve of Bella's normal bedtime attire, old sweats and a ratty t-shirt. A wistful smile turned up the corners of my mouth. The night of our first kiss was one of my happiest memories. She had looked so beautiful. The bedroom door opened behind me, interrupting my reverie. I turned, somewhat hesitantly. Bella was radiant in a long, cream-colored silk nightgown. It was simply cut, with spaghetti-thin straps of braided silk cord. A long slit ran from her ankle to the middle of her right thigh. My eyes traveled up, caressing her womanly curves, which were neither hidden nor completely revealed by the smooth fabric. Her hair was still damp, but it was combed straight, lying in long ebony strands over her sun-kissed shoulders and down her back. The vision before me was so elegant and stunning that I forgot to breathe. Bella ducked her head, glancing up at me from beneath her thick lashes. Normally, when she looked at me this way, it was accompanied by a rosy blush. I was confused when her face remained cool. She took 5 measured steps toward me, stopping at the side of the bed, with a small smile hovering about her lips. "Are you coming to bed?" she asked quietly. I cleared my throat, a very human response. Yes." I was very conscious of the fact that I was wearing a pair of linen trousers, cinched loosely at the waist with a drawstring. Why hadn't I at least thought to grab a shirt? Bella climbed into the bed, showing only the slightest hesitation from muscles which were obviously bruised and fatigued. She would be sore tomorrow. Under normal circumstances, I would have offered her a light massage to rub away the aches. I didn't dare do that now. I will not give in. I will not waver. My mantra had been so convincing in the bright light of the kitchen. Now, with the moonlight illuminating Bella's face and figure, I was not so sure. She lay down in the exact center of the bed, and held her hand out to me, inviting me to join her. My feet were moving on their own accord, and I settled down next to her. I left 6 inches of space between us. No man's land. But Bella discarded the one-sided treaty and closed the gap. Her face was tilted up to mine. Her eyes were half closed, and her lips vibrated gently with pent-up desire. Afraid to breathe, I wrapped my arms around her shoulders and drew her head down to rest on my chest. Bella sighed. She was disappointed that I had not kissed her. I pressed my lips to the top of her head and ran my hand soothingly down her back. "You're exhausted, my love. Try to get some sleep. Let your body recover." "There's nothing wrong with my body." Her fingers were tracing paths of flame across my abdomen. She outlined each individual muscle of my stomach, gradually working her way downwards. I swallowed, tense and uncomfortable. The molten flames were building inside me. I will not give in. I will not waver. Was it not enough that I had to stifle my longing, curb my urges? The return to celibacy was more painful than every temptation I had ever faced. I belligerently repeated my mantra until the fire cooled. It was not gone, only smoldering quietly, but it was manageable, for now. Bella's fingers paused at my waistband. I had not acknowledged her caresses in any way, not denying her right to touch me, nor encouraging her to continue. What was she thinking about? Was she nervous about her forward behavior? Bella was no more schooled in the art of seduction than I was. Even so, she seemed to naturally know exactly what would drive me wild with desire. I was glad she paused. Some sign of nervousness or restraint was good. Her cheek felt suddenly hotter, pressed against my chest. Her fingers twitched, but then they began the path back toward my chest. Her hand came to rest then, warming my heart. It was this very pose that had melted my resistance last night in the ocean. I tightened my embrace minutely. Bella's breathing slowed then, and her heartbeat settled into a steady rhythm of sleep. I breathed a brief thank you, and settled in to wait out one of the longest nights of my interminable existence. I lay staring blankly at the wall for hours. A small part of my consciousness counted the slow ticking of the wall clock. It taunted me with its slow pace. In the life of an immortal, one night was equivalent to a short breath. In my case, one night dragged on, and on, and on. I glared at the offending timepiece. It was mounted on the wall opposite me. Finely wrought steel was cut into intricate palm leaves, and wound around the circumference of the clock face in a tropical motif. This bedroom was smaller than the other, of course, but in many ways it was more suited to me. It was darker, more masculine. Teak paneling gave it a warm appeal, and the furniture was all handcrafted from hard woods. Koa wood, I would guess, from the golden glow and heavy scent. The bed was smaller also, and made up of luxurious blue silk. Like the other room, one wall was completely constructed of tall windows, with French doors leading out to the beach. Esme's imaginative design and delicate touch were evident in the choice of color and materials. Palm branches swayed outside, dancing in the silvery light of the moon. This was a lover's retreat, offering a peaceful interlude for companions to enjoy each other and share one another's company. It was difficult to feel peaceful, with Bella's warm body draped with such tantalizing abandon over mine. In an attempt to keep my imagination under wraps, I recited the Constitution of the United States to myself. Then I translated it into every major language I knew: Spanish, French, German, Arabic, Portuguese. I was halfway through the Japanese recitation when I noticed the perceptible lightning outside. A glance at the detested clock confirmed that it was almost 6 o'clock. The sun would rise soon. The seconds ticked on. Bella inhaled slowly and rolled onto her back. Her eyes were still closed as she raised her arms above her head and stretched languidly. She exhaled and turned her head to peer at me. "Hey," she said sleepily. "Good morning, love," I replied, just relieved that the night was over. Bella snuggled into my side again, seeking respite from the oppressive heat. Even in the early morning, the air was heavy with humidity and very warm. How ironic! Last spring I had been so jealous of Jacob Black and his ability to keep her warm while camping in the mountains. I felt a lot better about that now.
So what's for breakfast, Chef Cullen?
What would you say to waffles with strawberries and whipped cream? I thought it was a very appropriate breakfast for a honeymoon. Romantic, sweet, and refreshing. Or at least that's how the host had described it on the cooking show.
That sounds delicious. Wait, strawberries in August?
Bella seemed momentarily baffled. We're in the southern hemisphere. It's almost springtime, I explained. She sat up suddenly.
You mean it gets hotter than this?
I couldn't help laughing. You used to live in Phoenix. Doesn't it reach over 100 degrees in the summer there?
Well, yes, but it isn't so humid that you need 2 showers a day.
Her retort made me laugh again. She looked so offended. You just can't be satisfied, can you? I teased. Too cold and rainy in Forks, too hot and sunny in the tropics. What am I going to do with you? I drew her back into my embrace.
I don't mind Forks. The rain's not so bad.
Her voice was muffled against my shoulder. That's a good thing, since we're a little conspicuous if we try to live in a sunnier region. Bella nodded her head, but whatever she was about to say was cut off by another growl from her impatient stomach. She colored with embarrassment and sat back up. That's my cue, right? I asked with a grin.
Let me just take a human minute, okay? Oh, and Edward?
Yes, love?
Those eggs you made last night tasted wonderful. Could I have some of those too?
Anything for you, Bella. I kissed her perfect nose and chuckled as her hopeful expression turned into a satisfied grin. She practically leapt out of the bed and walked swiftly to the bathroom. Only the flash of her thigh through the long slit of her gown sent a momentary shock of uncomfortable desire through me. However, I took too much joy in her exuberant attitude to allow my dark mood to return. "What a night," I sighed as I padded into the kitchen to prepare her breakfast, slipping into a charcoal gray t-shirt as I walked. I avoided listening to Bella as she lingered in the shower. I needed to formulate a strategy. We had planned to stay on the island for 2 weeks before returning to Forks and preparing for our move to Dartmouth. So I had 12 days, and 12 nights, I reminded myself with a groan, to wait, to keep Bella busy and distracted. I did not relish the thought of more nights like last night. I decided to pick out some activities to keep myself busy while Bella slept. It wasn't that I was bored. Rather, I was so awake, and every sense was so highly tuned to Bella's presence, that every second was an agonizing temptation to gaze at her, stroke her porcelain skin, kiss her, bury my face in her hair, and inhale the fiery bouquet of her scent. I had the waffle batter mixed and resting on the counter, to allow the elastins to develop, or something like that. I cracked several eggs into a small mixing bowl. I marveled for a second at my body's ability to handle something so fragile as an egg, and brush it against the side of a metal bowl with just the right amount of force to crack it open. If I increased the pressure by the smallest fraction, the shell and yolk inside would have been shattered, obliterated. It was a chilling thought. Bella's body was barely stronger than this egg, her bones so easily broken. Hadn't she fractured a knuckle just punching Jacob's jaw? Human force broke her. I would crush her. My teeth were clenched in agony as I saw her body in my perfect memory. She was stretching in the moonlight, completely covered in bruises. Only my continuous exposure to human weakness had given my muscles the subconscious control to avoid killing her. Neither of us could afford for me to lose control like that again. While my brain spun in circles, my hands were busy. I added a small cup of water, and in mere seconds whipped the eggs into a frothy blend of yellow slime. My stomach recoiled. With a shake of my head, I ignored my natural revulsion and set the frying pan on the stove to heat. I was glad Bella had a huge appetite and was enjoying my cooking. I had to trust the chefs on TV, and the details of sight and smell I had picked up from watching Bella prepare meals for herself and Charlie. In my opinion, this looked just as appetizing as the mealworms our biology instructor fed to his pet iguana. I finished assembling Bella's breakfast, and was just spooning whipped cream onto the mound of sliced strawberries when she came out of the bedroom. She was dressed in a pair of khaki shorts and a rose-hued tank top. Like many of the clothes Alice picked out, the cuts were simple but flattering. Strawberries and cream. Part of my mind smirked at the analogy. She looked good enough to eat. I raised an eyebrow and smiled as she crossed the room and wrapped her arms around me.
Wow, is all that for me?
My mind flashed back to the bowls of batter and raw eggs. No, too gross. You don't have to eat it all. I just wanted the presentation to be right. Half a Belgian waffle just doesn't have the same impact.
Let me guess. Food Network?
Of course, I replied with a smug grin. She chuckled and eased into a chair I pulled out for her. Yes, her muscles were definitely sore. That would explain the extra long shower.
So what does my tour guide have planned for today?
Bella's voice was amused. She dug into her breakfast as if she hadn't eaten an impossibly huge dinner the night before.
Wow, this is unbelievable. Why do you have to be so good at everything?
Why did she sound annoyed? Does it bother you that I love you and want to take care of you? I asked. After my insecure thoughts yesterday, I was really curious to know how she felt about the perceived imbalance in our relationship. Never mind that I didn't feel worthy of her, so considerate and selfless and brave.
No, I really love that about you. It makes me feel safe and secure.
She paused in between bites, looking pensively at her plate.
It's just that I don't always understand what it is I do for you. You can buy whatever you want. You're impervious to most physical threats. I guess It just seems like I'm always taking, and you're always giving.
Oh, so it was this argument again. Bella's brooding eyes were hidden behind lowered lashes. Tenderly, I lifted her chin, so that she could see the truth of my words on my face. Bella, you are my life, my love, my entire future. You have resurrected my humanity, something I thought was lost more than 80 years ago. You have inspired me, loved me, and made me happier than any man, mortal or immortal, has a right to hope for. What gift could be greater than your body and soul? I will treasure that gift for all eternity. That is why I can never bear to hurt you again. Bella was breathless, perhaps shocked by the force behind my declaration. Before I could overthink it, I brushed my lips tenderly against her lips, her nose, and her eyes, as they fluttered closed at my touch. I noticed that her knuckles were turning white, as she clenched her fork in her hand. I pulled back to let her regain her composure. She dipped her head to take a hasty bite, and kept her eyes downcast as she chewed and swallowed.
I guess you do love me.
Her posture indicated that her thoughts went much further. Her unspoken words drove a wedge of guilt into my side, as I remembered her wistful sighs laying in my arms last night. Soon, my love, I thought. Soon.
You are so absurd,
I chuckled. Now finish your breakfast. I want to see if we can find those birds that were making such a racket last night. They sounded like a species I saw last time I was in South America, but I can't be sure. Don't worry, it'll be fun, I assured her, when I noticed her skeptical look. Oh, and you'll want to wear some sturdy shoes. We may not be staying on the paths. She groaned at this revelation, and I burst into loud laughter. The atmosphere in the room had lightened considerably. Bella finished her food swiftly then, and we left the house in a hurry, like two eager young adventurers, carefree and in love. Isle Esme was shaped like a teardrop, less than 2 miles long, and much narrower in width. The northernmost part tapered to a point, with the house perched in a position where you could see the ocean from 3 sides. The bottom third of the island rose into a rocky peak, which crested about 150 feet above sea level. A thick jungle formed a canopy over the slopes, thinning at the higher elevations, but forming an abrupt wall of green shadows by the beach. A thin strip of sand rimmed the southern part of the island, periodically interrupted by rocky tide pools. This was our destination, as we walked hand in hand along the eastern coastline. Bella stopped occasionally to examine a particularly colorful shell, or a well-formed rock. I had no desire to push our leisurely pace. A peaceful harmony existed between us. Words were unnecessary. With Bella's eyes on her feet, I took responsibility for steering our course around the occasional piece of driftwood or exposed coral shelf. The sun was still low in the sky, and our shadows stretched off to the right, rippling across the uneven sand. I found myself humming brief stitches of a melody. It was enchanting and powerful, but incomplete. I knew what I would be focusing on tonight. In the shallow water, large shadows were gliding, occasionally disappearing into the deeper spaces between the reef. Then I saw a reptilian head rise above the water for a couple seconds. Turtles. They must be. I was impressed by their size. The largest was probably 3 feet across at the widest point of its mottled green shell.
Bella, look. I pointed to the place where I had last seen one surface. Sea turtles. Turtles? Where?
She was instantly intrigued, her aimless shell hunt momentarily abandoned. Her face reflected the same childish wonder she had exhibited yesterday.
I wish she could see through my eyes. The sun reflected off the rippling ocean, as if angels had recklessly scattered armfuls of diamonds across the open water. Deep tones of aquamarine were interrupted by darker places, shadows of reefs that were entire ecosystems of their own. Coral, thousands of fish, eels, sharks. I could feel the ocean brimming with life and energy. Another turtle surfaced for air, and Bella gasped. Through her eyes, they would seem to be simply green. I could pick out the individual swirls of olive, mustard yellow, and black. I could identify the color of its eyes, amber like mine when fresh from the hunt. Each individual crease of its fleshy neck was a bold line. If this was the joy I derived from Bella's human experiences, how much more satisfying would it be to watch the whole world unfurl before her through the brilliancy of acute vampire senses? It was mid-morning when we ducked into the shadowed confines of the jungle. Although we were sheltered from the direct sunlight here, the air was oppressive and humid.
Only 5 yards into the dense foliage, the breeze was non-existent, and I was overwhelmed by a myriad of smells. The heavy fragrance of a flower I didn't recognize was wafting over the musty smell of composting vegetation, damp earth, and the faintest trace of methane that indicated an active termite colony close by. Bella slipped on the thick leaves and grabbed onto my arm for support. "Are you okay?" She nodded.
"Yeah, I just wasn't watching where I was stepping. This is so... I don't even know how to say it. It's breathtaking."
That was the word I was looking for. I was drinking in her face, softly illuminated by the fractured shafts of sunlight. The air glowed green from the light shining through the leafy canopy more than 50 feet above our heads. A raucous call broke through the sultry air.
"Are those the birds we're looking for?"
Bella asked. "The very same. I think they may be parrots." This way." I led the way slowly, following the sound of cackling and rustling wings. Bella gingerly clasped my hand for stability as we clambered over crowded, mossy logs and clustered piles of branches and leaves. Finding the parrots was a fun excursion. When we caught sight of our first one, Bella was delighted. Snowy white plumage gave the bird a spirit-like appearance in the dim interior. This image was destroyed, however, when it broke into an undignified rant, trying to chase us away.
"Shh, we won't hurt you."
Bella was talking to the thing. I shook my head, but then I snapped back in shock when the bird mimicked her last 2 words.
"Hurt you?"
She was practically jumping up and down.
"Did you hear that? He talks. I didn't know parrots talked without being trained."
Neither did I. I shot the bird a bemused glare. First the dolphins, now the parrots. Granted, there were no thoughts coming from the birds. Their brains were not highly developed at all. However, it was a little disconcerting to hear human words coming from a very inhuman mouth. The morning passed quickly. I caught glimpses of several other birds. Multi-hued feathers flashed among the branches, but only the first paid us any attention. With Bella badgering me to join in, I tried a few different lines, but the creature obviously preferred Bella. I didn't blame it. She was so warm and friendly, and I was cold and dangerous. I shrugged the thought away, content to let the gibberish continue. Bella wasn't bored at all, but before long she was famished and thirsty. With a silly little wave to the latest addition to our menagerie, Bella and I quit the wooded area in favor of the west-facing beach. The sun beat down on us. We walked quickly now. I was eager to get Bella into the shade, so she wouldn't get dehydrated or overheated. I cursed myself when I realized we had chosen the long route back. The beach curved sharply to the right. We had to walk the uneven rocky perimeter of a beautiful little bay. The rocky inlet dug into the west side of the island, forming a sheltered cove. The reef was partially exposed, and rainbow-colored schools of fish darted around in the shallows. "Have you ever been snorkeling?" I asked Bella.
I did once when I was younger. I'm not very good at it, but I'll try not to swallow my mouthpiece."
"You swallowed your mouthpiece?" I was alarmed.
"Well, I didn't really swallow it. It detached while I was swimming, and it got lodged behind my teeth. The lifeguard had to pry my jaw open and yank it out,"
she admitted, with a familiar blush of embarrassment. "Only you," I sighed.
"Yeah, I know," she replied with a sardonic laugh.
It was noon by the time we were back at the house. Bella guzzled 2 large glasses of water, while I assembled a quick lunch for her. A sandwich, a glass of orange juice, and a salad. I had requested that the cleaning crew stock ingredients that would enable Bella to have a varied diet here, but no fish. I didn't see any reason to subject myself to the odor of cooking fish. Charlie wasn't here, and even though they ate it frequently at home, I knew fish was his favorite, not hers. More evidence of her selflessness, of course. I smiled to myself. Bella barely paused to breathe when I set the plate in front of her. She immediately bit into the sandwich with a satisfied moan. With her eyes half closed and her face reflecting her bliss, I was having trouble keeping my thoughts on the present. I stood up more quickly than normal. I never could maintain the human facade around Bella. Here, while we were alone, I often darted to my destination at normal speed. What purpose did it serve to restrain myself? I stood at the sink, focusing my attention on the domestic chore of washing dishes. I had done this dozens of times with Bella, and the motions were automatic. I was trying not to fixate on Bella's body, radiating warmth even in the tropic heat. The sounds of her eating, breathing, and of course, the ever-present rhythm of her heart. It saturated my consciousness, and my mind floated. The rhythm accelerated, and I glanced curiously at her from the corner of my eye. Was she all right? Bella's plate was empty, and she held her glass in her right hand. Condensation gathered on the glass, collecting in drops, that trickled one by one down the side and splashed onto the table. The water fragmented into tiny droplets with a tinkling sound. Bella's face was red, and her eyes seemed unfocused. No, they were too focused, locked on my... The plate in my hand shattered. I gripped the edges of the counter with both hands, measuring and exerting just enough pressure to steady myself without fracturing the counter or denting the stainless steel sink. My vision swam. I gathered the pieces of the crushed flatware. Where was that snorkeling equipment? I left the kitchen at vampire speed, unable to meet her startled gaze.